This video captures the full power and force of Israeli bombs being dropped on Gaza.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה. לא במבצע, לא בסבבים, במלחמה.
The Israel-Palestine conflict is an ongoing conflict between the Israel and the State of Palestine, which are disputing the sovereignty over the territories of Palestine, which include the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem, and the right of return of Palestinian refugees. On October 7, 2023, the unforeseen invasion occurred. Hamas fighters stormed Israeli towns, launching thousands of rockets, giving the results of losing hundreds of people on both sides. What, how and why did it happen? The Israel-Palestine conflict is over a century rooted in territorial and religious disputes. To understand the complexities of this conflict, we may have delved into some of the key players and regions involved in it. Hamas, which basically means zeal in Arabic, is a Palestinian political and militant group, founded by Sheikh Ahmed Yassin to fight and break away from Israel. They first came into prominence in 1987, when Palestinians revolted against the State of Israel. This group sees themselves as defenders of Palestinian rights against Israeli occupation. Now, according to a video by the Wall Street Journal, the attack on Israel began when the same Hamas militants launched multiple rockets on Israel. These militants infiltrated Israel near the Kerem Shalom crossing, an important checkpoint between Israel and Gaza. They broke the border fence and attacked the Israeli military base over there, and by late morning these militants began destroying sections of the border barriers, allowing more of them to infiltrate by 7:30 a.m. Hamas militants were spotted in Israeli towns and cities. Multiple Israeli civilians were taken as life hostages and many more were killed as of the day. More than 2,300 people have been injured and we have lost more than 700 people. It is a complete disaster right now. Now, to understand the roots of this conflict, let's go back to early 20th century. This is when Palestine was ruled by the Ottoman Empire. At that time, seeing the rising anti-Semitism in Europe, a small segment of Jewish people started settling in this Ottoman Empire. Then during World War I, entered everyone's favorite empire, the British Empire. Now these British wanted to defeat the Ottoman Empire, so to gather support they made a deal with both the Arabs and Jews in this region to help. This was the very beginning of the Palestinian conflict that we see today. These Britishers knew what both parties wanted, so they promised the Arabs independence and the Jewish people a separate country. Because there was a rising belief among Jews that they should have their separate land in Palestine, and this movement was called Zionism. So after the British overthrew the Ottoman Empire, in order to fulfill their deal, they decided to carve out some land in Palestine and give it to the Jews, who were a growing population, as more Jews had fled Europe during and after the World War II. Now this didn't go down very well with the Arabs and they resisted this, and this turned things extremely violent. The British were unable to control the violence, and in 1947, after 30 years of controlling Palestine, they washed this part of the country in the hands of the United Nations. To control the situation, the United Nations voted to partition Palestine into two states, one Jewish and one Arab. The thing is, they assigned over 55% of the land to Jews, which angered the Arabs even more. The situation escalated and finally violence broke out between the two sets of people again, and this was the first Arab-Israeli War of 1948. So as the result of this war, the Jews, or the Palestinian Jews who declared themselves as a state of Israel, controlled not only the area proposed by United Nations but also gained almost 60% of the area proposed for the Arab state. Several massacres by the Israelis' forces took place in 1948, which forced 250,000 Arabs to leave the country. Since then there were more and more attempts to partition the land, but nothing else was possible except more violence until 1967. After a 6-day war, Israel finally captured the West Bank, Gaza, and Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. But they returned it back in 1978 under a peace treaty brokered by the U.S. called the Camp David Accord. Almost 10 years had passed after the peace treaty in 1987, when violent protests broke out again, with Palestinian Arabs revolting against Israel's military occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. This was known as the Intifada, the turning point in this long story between Israel and Palestine, because it led to the formation of the extremist militant group that we spoke about earlier, the Hamas, which is currently attacking Israel. In the 2000s, the Second Intifada adapted, which pushed Israel to leave Gaza. By 2007, Hamas had captured Gaza after the fight with another extremist group, the Fatah, which went on to control the West Bank, which brings us to today. What triggered Hamas to invade Israel, and where did things go horribly wrong? It's too early to provide fixed reasons, but this is what has been reported as of the day. Israel established a blockade in Gaza after Hamas captured it. And according to the human rights group, It's described as an open-air prison which has left 45% of the population there unemployed. The condition is similar as the West Bank, where Israel has established a separation wall cutting off thousands of Palestinians from social services, schools, and farmlands. Last few years, tensions between the Israeli settlers in the area and the Palestinians have been growing, and this tension erupted after the Al-Aqsa Mosque incident recently. So Al-Aqsa Mosque is considered the holiest place in both Judaism and Islam. According to the Seattle Times, in the past few years, Jews were prevented from praying inside the compound to avoid any violent protest from the Palestinians. But last week, according to The Guardian, the Palestinian Jews trailed inside the mosque compound, which triggered the Palestinian Arabs. Now, the exact motivation behind this attack is not clear, but according to Hamas spokesperson Khaled Kadomi, this became the trigger point and led them to launch a coordinated attack on Israel. Now, while the Hamas are claiming the reason to protect their holy shrine, several innocent civilians are getting brutally killed both in Palestine and in Israel. During ongoing wars, it is really evil to point fingers as one side is right and one side is wrong, but the reality is there are no real successes from wars. What do you think about this conflict, and how do you think this is going to affect the economies and geopolitical situation of the world? Comment below. Thanks for watching.